James was climbing a high cliff. He was alone and enjoyed the challenge. He often climbed solo because it made him feel free and strong. The sun was bright in the sky. His hands were sweaty as he grabbed the rough rock surface. He carefully placed each foot, checking his balance. The wind blew gently, making it harder to keep steady. As James reached for the next hold, his rope slipped a little. His heart started to beat faster. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. He looked at the rope. It was still holding him, but it looked loose. He knew he had to be very careful now. James adjusted his position, making sure his feet were firm on the rock. He slowly moved his hand to secure the rope again. He tried not to think too much, but as he tightened the rope, it slipped again. This time, it moved a bit more. James felt a wave of fear. He realized he was in a dangerous situation. James looked down. The ground was far below, and he knew a fall could be deadly. He needed to make a choice. Should he try to climb back up or stay still? He was afraid to move. If he climbed, the rope could slip more. If he stayed, it could drag him down. James felt his mind racing. He couldn't decide. Sweat dripped down his face. James decided he had to try something. He looked at the rope again and noticed it was starting to fray. This made him panic. James knew the rope might break if it frayed more. He felt a chill run through him. He had to act fast. He reached for the rock again, pulling himself up. His arms were shaking as he gripped the rock tightly. He needed to use all his strength. Slowly, he moved his body up, little by little. His muscles hurt. The rope slipped again, and this time James nearly lost his grip. His fingers clung to the rough surface. He held on, breathing heavily, not giving up. James stopped to catch his breath. He looked at the rope. It was hanging by just a few threads. He knew he had to cut it or climb quickly to a safe spot. He reached into his pocket and took out a knife. His hand was shaking, but he forced himself to stay steady. He looked up, then down, feeling unsure. James thought about the other climbers who might use the same rope. He didn't want to cut it and put them at risk. He needed to save himself and others. He decided to climb. He pulled himself up again, inch by inch. He could feel his arms getting weaker, but he kept moving. He needed to reach the top. His mind focused on the task. He placed each foot with care. He used his legs more to save his arm strength. The climb felt longer and harder now. Suddenly, the rope jerked. James gasped as the rope began to fray even more. He knew he was out of time. He pushed himself harder to get to a safe place. James grabbed the next rock hold with all his might. He felt the rope start to tear completely. His heart pounded in his chest. He was almost there. He took one last big pull. As he did, the rope snapped and fell. James swung sideways, but he held on to the rock with all his strength. He didn't fall. He took deep breaths, looking down at the broken rope. He was safe now, but only barely. He knew he had been lucky to hold on when the rope broke. Jake was a park ranger who loved his job. Every day he would walk through the trees and watch over the animals. He knew every trail and hidden spot in the park. One summer day, Jake noticed smoke in the distance. He ran to get a better look. His heart raced as he saw a large fire spreading quickly. The air smelled of burning wood. He radioed for help, but he heard that the fire was moving too fast. He had to act fast to survive. He looked around, trying to find a way to escape the flames. The fire surrounded him on 3 sides, closing in rapidly. It crackled and roared as it burned through the dry grass and bushes. He felt the intense heat on his face. There was no way he could run through the fire. The path ahead was blocked, and the smoke made it hard to see. His eyes watered, and he coughed, struggling to breathe. He thought of the stream nearby. If he could reach it, he might have a chance. But the fire was moving so fast, and the heat was growing stronger. He had to decide quickly. Jake sprinted toward the stream. The fire chased him, its flames leaping closer. His legs ached, but he kept pushing forward. The thick smoke swirled around him. Just when it seemed like the fire would catch him, he jumped into the cool water. He submerged himself, gasping for air. The water felt cold, but it offered protection. He lay flat in the stream, with only his head above water. The flames reached the edge of the stream, but did not cross. He stayed as low as he could, barely moving. Time passed slowly as he stayed in the water. He could hear the fire roaring above him. His body trembled, and his skin felt hot even in the water. When the fire moved away, he carefully lifted his head. The area around him was black and charred. The trees were burnt, and the air was thick with smoke. Jake's heart still beat fast. He stood up, shivering from both fear and the cold. He was safe, but the park he loved was badly damaged. He felt both relief and sadness. As he looked around, he saw other rangers coming to help. They explained that it was a controlled burn that got out of hand. The wind had changed direction too quickly. They assured Jake that he had made the right decision to go into the stream. If he had tried to outrun the fire, he might not have survived. He nodded, still shaking. Jake learned that sometimes nature is unpredictable. He had done his best and stayed calm. He knew he would help the park recover and become strong again. John was driving home on a rainy evening. The road was wet and shiny under the streetlights. He could barely see the car in front of him through the mist. The rain made everything blurry, and he turned on his wipers to see better. He adjusted his seat and felt for his phone. A new message flashed on the screen. He quickly glanced down at his phone. It was just a quick look, but that was enough. His car suddenly began to slide on the slick road, and his heart jumped. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. The car spun left, then right. The tires screeched against the asphalt. John tried to stay calm, but panic grew inside him. He had never felt so out of control. The car spun wildly, and he felt the world turning around him. He remembered what people said about skidding in the rain. Steer into the skid, he thought. It was advice he heard before, but never needed. Now it felt like the only chance to save himself from a bad crash. John turned the wheel slowly in the direction of the spin. The car kept sliding, but slowed a little. He was not sure if he should turn more or let go of the wheel. His heart raced. The car drifted closer to the side of the road. Another car approached from the opposite direction, its lights bright in the rain. John felt a strong urge to just let go. He was scared and unsure what to do next. But he held on, adjusting the wheel slightly as the car moved forward. The other car honked loudly. John could see the driver's face, full of fear. He couldn't believe how close he was to hitting them. He took a deep breath and focused. John's car moved back into his lane, just missing the oncoming car by inches. He was shaking but still holding on tightly. His knuckles were white. The car finally stopped spinning. It moved straight again. John felt like he could breathe for the first time since the slide started. He exhaled in relief. He slowed down, his heartbeat still fast. He replayed the moment in his head. How did it start? What made him lose control? Then he remembered the phone message. That tiny moment, looking at his phone, was what caused everything. If he hadn't looked, maybe the car would have stayed steady on the wet road. He felt a wave of regret. A simple mistake almost caused a serious crash. John promised himself he would never look at his phone while driving again. He drove home carefully, thinking about how quickly things changed. He learned that even one small distraction could be dangerous. Safety had to come first. When John reached home, he parked his car and sat in silence. He still couldn't believe how close he came to a disaster. It was a lesson he would never forget. He got out of the car and walked slowly to his front door. The rain was still falling, but he didn't mind it now. He felt lucky just to be safe and sound. Jack was driving on a quiet road when the sky turned gray. Snow started falling quickly, covering the road. It became hard to see far ahead. Soon, the snow got heavier. Jack tried to keep the car moving, but it slowed down. The wheels spun in place. The car was stuck deep in the snow. He pressed the gas pedal again, but nothing happened. He was miles away from any town. Jack knew he had to make a decision. Should he stay or go look for help? Jack looked around. Snow piled up higher each minute. He knew staying in the car could be dangerous. His phone had no signal, and he had little food and water. Jack decided to leave the car. He put on his coat, hat, and gloves. The wind blew hard, and snow hit his face like tiny cold needles. He started walking. Each step was slow and heavy. He thought about turning back, but he knew he couldn't stay stuck. He kept going, hoping to see some lights or a sign of help. After walking for what felt like hours, Jack's legs grew weak. He couldn't feel his fingers or toes anymore. The snow was now almost up to his knees. He looked back and saw nothing but white snow. He couldn't even see where his car was anymore. He started to worry that he made the wrong choice. "I have to keep moving," Jack told himself, even though he was tired. He took deep breaths and moved forward. Suddenly, he saw something in the distance. It was an old wooden cabin. Jack felt a little hope. He pushed through the snow and reached the door. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside, it was dark and cold. He closed the door and sat down, shivering. There was no light or heat in the cabin, but it was better than being outside. He tried to rest for a while. Jack thought about his car. What if help came by while he was gone? He didn't know if he should wait here or go back. The storm outside was still strong. Suddenly, he heard a loud noise. He looked out the window and saw a snowplow moving slowly through the snow. Jack couldn't believe it. Help was so close now. The snowplow stopped, and the driver stepped out. He looked around, then got back in. Jack waved and shouted, but the snow was too thick. The driver couldn't see him. Jack felt panic rising. He ran outside, but the snowplow was gone. He watched it disappear into the storm. He felt tired, but he knew he had to go back to his car. It took a long time for Jack to reach his car. He was exhausted and freezing. When he got there, he saw a surprise. His car had been cleared of snow. Someone had already been there. The snowplow must have rescued his car. He laughed softly, both happy and amazed. He climbed inside and turned on the car. The engine started, and the car warmed up. Jack drove slowly back onto the road. The storm still raged, but he knew he would be safe now. He had made it through.